Imrana, there is a specific section in the framework addressing sexual assault, and there are recommendations in the area of criminal law and various other areas. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Sure. One of the most important things is the definition of rape. In the majority of countries, rape does not include marital rape. So the framework is very clear that there should be no spousal immunity, and that a prosecution ought to be able to file against a person for marital rape. In addition to that, it broadens, the framework suggests that the definition of rape should be broadened to include the violation of any orifice with any object, and that it should be graded so that if it should be graded depending on the gravity of harm, and of course the sentencing should also reflect that gravity of harm. So it suggests a very broad, all-inclusive definition of sexual violence and sexual assault, and that the main philosophy behind that, if you like, is that the act of sexual assault ought not to be looked at from the point of view of the perpetrator, but from the point of view of the victim survivor of sexual assault.
What about services? Is that addressed in the framework?
It does, in a similar way that there is a suggestion that there should be comprehensive services provided for victims of domestic violence. The same suggestion is made for survivors of sexual assault, so that there's a rape crisis centres, which are common especially in the developed world, so that a woman who is abused can go to a rape crisis centre and all the services are provided there, that she's able to be questioned there, the police can question her, she can get medical treatment, health treatment, and so on and so forth. So there's a very clear recommendation about having comprehensive services provided in a single place, so that a woman doesn't have to be carted from the hospital to the police station and elsewhere to get all those services.
Right, very important in rape cases.
It's extremely important.
Rape cases and sexual assault cases have proven very difficult to prosecute successfully around the world. Can you talk about that and what might be done and what the framework suggests as far as required evidence in these cases to address that?
Absolutely. We all know, don't we, Cheryl, from our work as women's rights campaigners for years, that one of the most critical elements is not to allow the survivor to feel that she is being re-victimized through the process of the court trial.
Right.
I mean, having been involved in court cases, and I'm sure you've witnessed these, it is the most harrowing, horrendous experience for any rape survivor. So the framework suggests that, for example, during the trial, that there should be respect for the survivor's privacy and integrity. For example, they suggest that in the hearing, in the questioning of the survivor, that there should possibly be a screen to protect her privacy. She doesn't necessarily have to face her assailant if she doesn't want to. So those sorts of suggestions, so that the survivor can feel she can give evidence without having the glare of the accuser of her assailant looking at her.
And there have been in past laws and current laws actually around the world statements about the presumption of caution, or that victim testimony needs to be corroborated. What does the framework say about that? The framework is very, very clear about that. There are two elements to that point. One is the issue of a delay in reporting. Right. Historically, throughout many legal systems, if a woman does not immediately report her sexual violence committed against her, there can be an inference drawn that she's lying, etc., etc. So the framework is very clear. It says there shall be no inference drawn from the fact that a woman has chosen not to report the rape, sexual violence against her immediately. So, and there should be a very clear mandatory point about that in the legislation. The other clear recommendation in the framework is that the famous corroboration warning, where a woman had to provide independent evidence that she had been sexually assaulted, that corroboration warning, it's actually unlawful for a judge or jury or group of assessors, as we have in our country, to remind themselves that they cannot make a finding of guilt without a corroboration warning. So the legislation should make it very clear that the corroboration warning, the discriminatory corroboration warning, cannot be made during the course of a court trial. Exactly. Very important.
Very important.
And what about as far as dropping the criminal charges or exculpating the defendant? What does the framework say about forgiveness, compensation?
The framework says that even if the perpetrator or his family or his community, his village, makes traditional forgiveness ceremonies to forgive the crime committed, the prosecution should still occur, and that the act of customary forgiveness shall not have an impact on the actual punishment.
Right.
So it makes it very clear that any kind of customary ceremonies may not be used to exculpate the perpetrator.
Okay. Now, one just last evidentiary issue I think that is so important in rape and sexual assault cases that the framework addresses about the need to show resistance, the proof of resistance of the victim survivor. What does the framework say about that?
As we all know, historically, the victim was required to show that she actively resisted the act of sexual violence in order to show that she did not give her consent. The framework makes it very clear that proof of resistance shall not be required to make a finding of guilt.
So these are very important reforms in the area of really getting at sexual assault and rape in cases throughout the world.
Absolutely, Cheryl. Very, very critical recommendations and highly recommended
to
people who are looking at the framework.
Thank you, Imrana.
Thank you.